The sun is down, the house is quiet, and you are not as alone as you think. Welcome to Ghostly Tales. I'm your host, Mel, and these are stories meant for the dark and for those brave enough to listen to them. The graveyard across the street. I used to live in a small house right across from an old graveyard. It wasn't large, maybe a few dozen headstones surrounded by a rusted fence, but it had been there for over a century. At first, I thought nothing of it. The rent was cheap, and the neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet, maybe. The first few weeks were peaceful. The sound of wind moving through the trees, owls calling late at night. Then the little things started. I would hear soft tapping on the windows. Not like branches, but sharper, like fingertips. Sometimes it would stop after a few seconds, but other nights it went on for hours. My porch light began flickering every night around the same time, just before midnight. I changed the bulb and checked the wiring, but nothing helped. I would catch movement in the corner of my eye across the road, like someone walking between the stones. But when I looked directly, there was never anyone there. One night, I woke to the sound of footsteps on my front porch. They were slow and heavy, pacing back and forth. My heart was pounding as I listened. The steps stopped right outside my door, and the silence that followed was so deep I could hear my own pulse. Then came the soft creak of the door handle turning. I didn't move. I just stared at the ceiling, frozen, waiting for something to happen. After a few seconds, the sound stopped, but I could swear I heard breathing on the other side of the door. A week later, I woke up to see my curtains moving, even though the windows were shut tight. My cat was sitting at the end of the bed, staring at the wall near the window with her tail puffed up. That was when I decided to stop looking out toward the graveyard altogether. My last night there, I heard a knock on my door. 3 slow knocks, right at midnight. I stood in the hallway, every light in the house on, waiting for it to stop. When it finally did, I looked through the peephole. Nothing but darkness. The next morning, when I stepped outside, there were footprints in the dew, leading from the gate of the graveyard straight to my front door. There were none leading back. I moved out 2 days later. Even now, when I drive down that road, I can't bring myself to look toward the headstones. Some places feel quiet, but they're not empty. The man outside my door. In my bedroom, I have a glass sliding door that leads to the backyard. I usually close the curtains at night, but since no one lives behind me and my dog goes in and out a lot, I often forget. The backyard is quiet and private, surrounded by woods, so I never think much of it. One night, while sleeping, I started to hear a faint tapping on the glass. I was half asleep, not sure if I was dreaming or awake. After a few moments, I managed to open my eyes and look toward the door, but nothing was there. I told myself it was probably just the wind and drifted back to sleep. Sometime later, I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. Then I could have sworn I heard the sound of someone messing with the handle. Fear shot through me. I wanted to look, but I was terrified of what I might see. Finally, I gathered the courage and glanced toward the glass. The woods outside were so dark that I could barely see anything. Heart pounding, I got up and slowly walked to the door. I turned on the backlight, expecting to see someone, but there was no one there. I left the light on and closed the curtain. Trying to calm myself, I grabbed my phone and checked the security cameras. They only record when motion is detected, and they are usually very accurate. Most of the time, it is just raccoons or stray cats crossing the patio. When I looked through the clips, nothing had been recorded for hours. There was no sign of anyone. I started to think maybe I had imagined it. Relieved, I got back into bed, pulled the covers up, and began to drift toward sleep. Then I heard it again. Tap, 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 tap. I sat upright, this time fully awake. Determined to see what was making the noise, I got out of bed and went to the curtain. My hands were shaking as I reached for it. I pulled it open and looked out the glass. A dark figure of a man stood there. The backlight was still on, but he was nothing more than a shadow. No features, no face, only darkness shaped like a person. I screamed. My dog bolted from the bed and ran to the door, barking wildly. He slammed himself against the glass as if trying to get at the figure outside. I grabbed my phone to call 911, my hands trembling so much I could barely tap the screen. When I looked back at the door, the man was gone. I did not stay to see if he would return. I grabbed my dog, ran to the bathroom, and locked us inside while I called the police. When they arrived, they searched the yard and the entire area around the house. There were no footprints and no signs of anyone being there. We checked the cameras again, but nothing had been recorded. The officers were polite, but I could tell they did not believe me. They told me it might have been a dream or a shadow, but I knew what I saw. I can still picture that dark figure standing outside my door as clearly as if it happened yesterday. I never leave the curtain open at night anymore. I also have trouble sleeping in that room now. Most nights I fall asleep on the couch with my dog beside me. Whenever I walk past that glass door, I can still feel the fear of that moment when I opened the curtain and saw him standing there in the dark. The handprint. I never paid much attention to things like ghosts. Strange noises in the house or odd dreams never bothered me. I always told myself there was a simple explanation for everything. But a few months ago, something happened that I still cannot explain, no matter how many times I think about it. The first time, I woke up feeling like my back was sore. Not the whole back, just one spot. I thought maybe I slept wrong. When I went into the bathroom to get ready for the day, I lifted my shirt and froze. There was a handprint on my back, a single handprint, clear and red, like someone had pressed down on me while I was sleeping. The shape was bigger than mine, and the fingers were longer. It looked fresh, almost like it had been made only minutes before I woke up. I tried not to panic. I searched my room for anything that could have caused it. Nothing had the right shape. My bed was normal, my blankets were normal, and I do not have anything near my bed that could leave a print like that. I told myself it must have been the way I slept. I forced myself to believe it, because the other option made my stomach turn. The mark faded, and eventually I stopped thinking about it. A few weeks passed. Then it happened again. This time, I woke up in the middle of the night. I felt pressure on the same spot on my back, enough to wake me, but not enough to hurt. At first, I thought it was a muscle twitch, but it felt too real, too heavy. I reached behind me, thinking maybe something had fallen on the bed, but there was nothing there. When I checked in the mirror, the handprint was back. Same size, same shape, same place. The third time it happened, I did not wake up during the night. I only noticed the print in the morning, and this time the area felt warm, almost like someone had held their hand there for a long time. I sat on the edge of my bed for a while, trying to think of anything that made sense. Nothing did. What scares me the most is that it is always the same hand, same size, same place. I have no proof of anything. I have no strange noises, no cold spots, no shadows in the corners of the room, just that single handprint that keeps showing up on my back, like someone is trying to get my attention. I still do not know what it means or why it keeps happening, but every time I feel that familiar soreness when I wake up, I know exactly what I will see when I look in the mirror. And I wish I understood why.
The Whistler in the Woods.
There is a quiet legend from small towns in the Appalachian region that many people have never heard of. Locals call it the Whistler. The story says that if you are out in the woods late at night, you might hear a slow and steady whistle drifting through the trees. It is never rushed, it is never cheerful. It just moves at its own pace. People say the strange part is not the sound itself, it is the way it moves. The whistle might start far away, almost like a soft echo on a hiking trail. But if you stand still and listen, it begins to drift closer. The tune never changes. It just keeps coming. One rule has been passed down through families for generations. Never whistle back. Those who have say the whistler mimics the tune perfectly, as if it is learning your sound. One man said he heard a whistle while camping and answered without thinking. Everything went silent for a few seconds. Then he heard his own tune whistled back at him from right behind his tent. He left immediately and said the sound followed him all the way to the road. Some believe the whistler is a spirit. Others think it is something older and far less human. Either way, people who live near those woods say the same thing. If you ever hear slow whistling after dark, keep walking and do not answer it.
A strange dream I still think about. Years ago, I kept having a dream that always felt a little too real. In the dream, I was standing in my kitchen late at night. Everything was quiet and still. For some reason, I would look out toward my backyard. My yard is surrounded by heavy woods, the kind that turn completely dark once the sun goes down. That was when I saw her. A girl was standing just inside the tree line. She never moved. She just stood there like she had been there for a long time. She wore a fuzzy bucket hat, like the ones people wore in the early 2000s, and a colorful striped shirt. Her clothes were bright against the darkness of the woods, and that made her look even more out of place. She did not lift her head or shift her weight. She simply stood there like a statue. The dream felt strange, but I brushed it off. Everyone has odd dreams sometimes. A few nights later, I had the same dream again. Same kitchen, same stillness, same girl in the woods. Only this time she began to turn her head, as if she was finally aware of me. Before I ever saw her face, I woke up with my heart pounding. I did not have the dream again, but it stayed with me. A few months later, I stumbled across an article about a girl who had gone missing in the early 2000s near the same stretch of woods behind my house. The details were vague and nothing connected directly, but I felt that same uneasy pull in my stomach that I always felt in the dream. It was nothing I could prove, nothing I could explain. Just a strange dream that refused to fade, and a feeling that someone once stood in those woods long before I ever lived there.
The wailing in the night. I used to think seaside towns were peaceful places. Something about the sound of waves always made me feel safe. But there was one summer I spent in a small coastal town that I will never forget. It changed the way I feel about the ocean at night. I stayed in a little rental house, only a short walk from the shoreline. During the day, everything felt calm. Children played in the sand, the gulls called overhead, and the whole place smelled like salt and warm sunlight. But the nights were different. The first time I heard it, I thought it was the wind, a long, low cry drifting across the water. I did not think much of it. A few nights later, it happened again. I woke up sometime after midnight to a noise that sent a chill straight through me. It was a wail. Not loud, not panicked, but full of something I still cannot name. It rose and fell like a voice calling out across the open water. I sat up in bed trying to convince myself it was just birds or the movement of the waves. The next morning, I asked an older man who ran a little bait shop by the docks if he had ever heard strange sounds at night. He gave me a long look before answering. He said people sometimes reported hearing crying near the water, especially during the summer months. He called it a strange old habit of the sea, a sound that comes and goes without reason. Then he warned me not to go near the shoreline after dark. For a while, I kept my windows closed and tried to sleep through the noises. But the wailing kept happening. Not every night, but often enough that I started waking up as soon as the first sound touched the air. It always came from the direction of the beach, and every time it happened, the sound grew clearer, as if it was getting closer to shore. One night, I made the mistake of opening my window. I wanted to prove to myself that it was just the wind. The moment I slid the glass up, the crying rushed in like it was waiting for me. The sound was so close I felt it in my chest. It was a woman's voice, soft and broken, drifting just beyond the dunes. I closed the window and backed away. I did not sleep the rest of the night. When I finally left that town, I felt relief in a way I cannot explain. But sometimes when the weather turns stormy and the wind picks up, I can still hear that faint crying in the back of my mind. It makes me wonder if whatever I heard was calling out for help or calling out for someone to come closer.
The 3 knocks. I never used to pay attention to sounds in my house. Most of them were the typical clicks and pops an old place makes when it settles. But one night changed the way I listened forever. It started with 3 hard knocks on my bedroom wall. Not a creak, not a tap, but 3 firm knocks in perfect rhythm. I sat up and waited, thinking maybe it came from the pipes or a neighbor, but everything fell dead silent afterward. The next night, it happened again. 3 knocks, same wall, same spot, same cold feeling that crawled up my spine the moment they hit. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it had to be something normal. I didn't want to believe that anything else could be inside my home. By the 3rd night, the knocks weren't the only thing happening. Small objects started shifting when no one was near them. A picture frame moved slightly to the side. A spoon slid on the counter. A book fell from a shelf even though the air was still. Every time something moved, the knocks would come a few minutes later, like a warning or an answer. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. When the knocks came that night, sharp and deliberate, I stood at the wall with my heart hammering and asked out loud, "What do you want?" The silence that followed felt heavy. I didn't hear an answer, but I felt one. A deep cold swept through the room, a kind of chill that made the air feel wrong. Later, when I told someone about it, they asked if it had always been 3 knocks. When I said yes, they got quiet and explained that in spiritual folklore, 3 knocks are said to mock the Trinity. It is a sign of something that does not come in kindness. I still don't know what knocked on my wall, and maybe I don't want to. All I know is that I haven't heard the knocks again. I feel like I'm just waiting for whatever it was to come back.
Thanks for listening to Ghostly Tales. If you enjoyed these stories, please leave us a review. It helps more listeners find their way into the dark. We'll be back next Wednesday with more tales.